So today I am delighted to be joined by the wonderful Lisa Robyn Wood of Grip Coaching Limited. Lisa is a qualified professional coach, experienced business leader, manager and podcaster herself. And you can check out her podcast, The Coaching Cast, which is on all major podcast platforms. So welcome, Lisa, and thank you for joining me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's so good to be here. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to join you. I'm very excited.
Yeah, so what I thought it'd be great to do is just tell us a little bit about your backstory, your history, and kind of how you got into the coaching and leadership world.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career in the corporate space, specifically the energy corporate space, where I worked with B2B clients for the majority of my career. And in 2014, I had been promoted to a senior leadership position and was now responsible for leaders myself and their full performance, their development. And I felt completely out of my depth. I had been an individual who had really enjoyed their career, enjoyed the success of that, worked hard to progress, and learned to be a manager during that time, evolved my skills as a manager. But when it became a need to be more of a leader and actually really help managers to be managers, I felt completely out of my depth. And actually, I felt quite very much a fraud, I would describe it as. So after about a year of desperately trying to fix how I was feeling, and actually by that point it had really unfortunately deteriorated into quite a dark, very miserable place where I was suffering with anxiety, a lot of negative self-talk and self-critique, and I was actually on the verge of leaving my successful career. I discovered coaching and had coaching myself and found the whole experience so transformational. It really reconnected me with my confidence, my self-belief, my capabilities, and just highlighted exactly what was wrong and why it was wrong. And therefore, once I had that clarity, I could work out what the best approach was to fix it. And the rest is history, to be honest, because I then went on to remain in that company, further excelled my career, decided to train to be a qualified coach myself. And 6 years later, here I am. So there's been a few different twists in the road along that way. I swapped industries for a bit and had a go at fast moving consumer goods, worked for Lucas A. Bibina for a couple of years, which was great. And then went on to support my husband to run his pub and hotel in the Cotswolds, which was a whole nother experience, jumping into the world of hospitality and also small business and entrepreneurship, which was an incredible experience, especially in the context of COVID. So that really added a layer of challenge. So yeah, and now I'm running my own business, Grip Coaching Limited, and that really focuses in on supporting leaders and managers to be even better at what they do, and very much with that tone of well-being. So you touch upon, your Happy Tradie. I couldn't agree more about that importance of happiness, because for me, when you feel great about yourself and what you're doing, you do an even better job. It's a no-brainer.
Brilliant. You know what? I'd have stopped at the pub hospitality bit, but hey, look, I know it's not all sunshine and rainbows in the pub world. So
no, it's not.
Especially
Everyone's got this romantic view of running and owning a pub, and that is all it is. It's a romance. It's not true.
Yeah. So that's great. It's really, really good to hear how you've sort of kind of, because actually the twist in the road, I think, is something that everyone kind of goes through. We all experience those. So just thinking about, sort of tradespeople and some of the challenges that they have. I mean, a lot of them start out, with that desire just to they enjoy what they do, they're good at what they do, and they want to, go out on their own. But what I don't think they realize is, or what can happen further down the line is, as they get more and more successful and as they start to grow, then all of a sudden they take on maybe one subcontractor, maybe two, maybe three. They might get some assistants to help them run, the sort of back office, and very quickly they can go from, a solo business, a one-man band, if you like, to suddenly being responsible for 3, 4, 5, 6 people. So, in your experience, what could you share that could help them cope, transitioning from suddenly working for themselves and only being responsible for themselves, to then, you know, being responsible for 5, 6, 7 or more other people?
It's such a great question, and it's so common. I think it happens to people, especially entrepreneurs who are setting up their own businesses. For some, it can happen really quickly, and in quite an unexpected way that doesn't always give a lot of opportunity for preparation. Because at the end of the day, if business is flooding your way, you're going to want to take it, and you're going to want to, you know, do as much as you possibly can. And I think that opportunity to take a pause and reflect on where you are, what's going on, what you need, is often what's missed. You're just stuck in there doing the do, and for some people, they continue to do the do even though they've got people around them. And it's that challenge of delegating that responsibility, because when it's always been you and you've got the skill set, people bought you as part of the business, then handing that off into others to take responsibility for it can also be tough. So I think what I've learned in this space, and it was very much true, actually, to be honest, in both my corporate career and in small business when I started running the pub and hotel with my husband, I think the lesson for me was always acknowledging that I have got people around me, and really being clear about what their role was and what mine is and what my expectation is of myself and them as well. And really ensuring that I was taking the time to define those roles and responsibilities and work on myself to really engage with those individuals, be clear with them about what I felt their responsibilities were, and setting a standard of expectation of delivery in the way of operating. And as well as, once that's established, giving people the space to actually do it.
Yeah.
And I think that is hard, because both, whether it's in the trade, in hospitality, everything can move at such a pace. You just have to be so disciplined at times to allow that ability to try things out, to go out there and deliver.
There's a couple of things there. I mean, you know, giving people space, allowing people to sort of, you know, kind of do their role, almost, you know, make mistakes, getting too heavy-handed. But also, what I thought was interesting there was you were talking about, you know, sort of just taking a pause, you know, and not kind of rushing things too much, and just taking a step back. And I think that's so important, to actually spend time, you know, it's that classic, isn't it, working you know, on your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not talking about a lot of time. I think when you say time, people assume or immediately go to a space of, I don't have that time, because the way we interpret time in these sorts of scenarios is that it's large. But actually, I always say, just take 30 minutes, even 30 minutes in a week, where you dedicate it to doing just that, pausing, doing some thinking. It's enough to get you started and to get into a habit of doing it. You know, I always used to put that time in my diary so that it was there, and I would do everything I could to protect it, because I recognized, and I definitely learned this the hard way, by the way, that if I didn't stop and do some thinking, actually I had no confidence that I was going in the right direction, and I had no confidence that those that I was leading and supporting were going in the right direction. That's when I think you get that headless chicken, where everyone's just running around being as busy as they can, but no one's really that clear as to whether anything's being achieved, or if we are, whether it's the right things.
And that kind of leads us nicely to the next question, really, which is thinking about you know, the traits or qualities that you've maybe identified in what makes good leaders, you know. And we've kind of, you know, being good at I suppose seeing the potential iceberg, you know, ahead, and having that ability to sort of pause and maybe, you know, strategize a little bit. But you know, what, you know, in your sort of experience, are the qualities that you see in good leaders?
I think listening, I think, is one of the biggest and best. I think this in a lot of different roles and that we have in life. But I think ultimately, when you're a leader, you are there to build and grow a team of people. That can be a team of one. Either way, there's more than one of you, so you're now a team. And I think that requires to be successful, a relationship. And to build a really good relationship requires you to communicate effectively, and that requires listening. And I think as a leader, listening to your people and what they think and how they are and what they're about, really starting to learn about them as individuals is crucial, because that's what will build the trust and the strong team dynamic, where you can then really have that open, fluid relationship that's able to deliver results, that's got the accountability. That will really help you when it comes to then delegating and taking the load off. But also from the perspective of your customers, the more you listen, the more that you'll understand, well, what your customers need, what do they want? And you end up, you're able to lead them effectively in your services. So I do think listening is crucial for really good leadership. And I think as well, that comes down to also being aware of yourself. That's listening inward too, because I think, when you're a leader, I think you have to be so aware of the impact you have on everybody else in your behaviors. I think the most successful leaders that I've ever experienced, both personally and I suppose publicly, are those that have a huge amount of self-awareness and emotional intelligence. So, they're very connected to themselves, what they think, the way that makes them feel, and therefore how they choose to show up every day, the behaviors. But once I think you really exercise that as a strength, you're able to become a lot more emotionally aware of everyone else. And then that is where you're able to then start really employing, empathy in how you behave.
I think that's really important. And again, you sort of identified something there of a question that I was going to ask you, really, which is around, a lot of the tradespeople that I work with find themselves being reluctant leaders. Like I said at the start, they don't often set out on a path to grow and scale a business. It just happens organically, maybe and predominantly really as a result of them being very good at what they do. They find themselves picking up a lot of word of mouth referrals that in turn grows their business. They don't want to turn it away, so they end up taking on more and more sort of subbies. So effectively they become this kind of reluctant leader in the business. And just to share a little bit about my sort of backstory and how I can empathize with that is, I found myself 15 years ago I was running my own small business, a print and design business in a sort of former life. And then I was asked to join a company which I'm sure a lot of the tradespeople listening to this will know, a company called Vanarama, which are a van and car leasing business. And very quickly my role went from managing me and say one other or two other in my little business to suddenly growing a very big team. The team went from 2 to 3 to 5 to 8 to 10 to 12 to 15 and 20, and I never set on my career path to to manage what at the time was a big team to me. I mean, in the big wide world, it's still a relatively small team. There was one thing, and the reason for the question is to talk a little bit about the disc profiling.
Oh yes, yeah.
I know part of your sort of toolkit. The one thing that that alerted me to the fact that I've kind of fitted this reluctant leader role was we did a similar thing, Discovery. I think they're frameworks.
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah, and it told me, the feedback I got was that I was in that world I was high green, which is empathy. Can't we all just get along? Let's cuddle it out. Let's non-confrontational, all that sort of stuff.
Collaborator, you're a collaborator.
Yeah, collaborator. And it taught me really that I was best suited to managing a much smaller team because I had too much emotional involvement. So with we're thinking about that. What's how could disc profiling help someone who's running a small but growing business and help them to understand themselves better, where their qualities lie? And
disc profiling, and it's it's one of many personality profiling tools that are built to really help you better understand your preferred communication and behavioral style. It's an indicator because actually the spectrum of behavior preferences contain behaviors that actually we all will exercise at any given point in our lives, and we do have the ability to do so. It's just what our stronger stance may sit more in one category than another. So you describe yours in that collaborative, empathetic, slightly more sensitive space. But it's all about the fact that actually all preferences are strengths. There's no negatives in there, because all of them have a place. I think it's so helpful to gain that insight, to raise your self-awareness, and that links back to, for me, what are the traits of a really strong leader. It is a leader who is really connected with who they are as a person, the way they operate, and why. Because I think when you understand that about yourself, you have a much greater, I think, appreciation for who you are as a human being, which is good to know, because you're aware of potentially your trigger points. You're aware then to know when they happen, how you better manage that. You understand why you're being triggered as well. And therefore you can then really work to change that as you see fit. So it actually then means that your behavior better serves you in circumstances. And I think with the DISC profile, that learning comes through those tools to get you that understanding, but actually it also then enables you to understand other people, so that actually when you do find yourself in a conflict with another, which, I mean, that's inevitable in life, you can actually start picking it apart as to why that is, and removing, I would say, the emotional side to it in a way that enables you to then do something very practical, because those types of reports give you data, information, it's objective, it enables you to start actually taking action around it, which can only strengthen your relationships.
Yeah.
So, I'm a huge lover of DISC. I've used it in both personally, but in organizations, and it's fantastic when looking at team dynamics as well, to really look at why is the team operating the way it is. Let's help the team to better understand each other. And then when you're looking at recruitment as well, it's a great tool to say, well, actually, we want to create diversity. We could do with some more of these sorts of preferences in individuals. So let's see how we recruit them in.
Yeah.
But it's only ever a guide. I think that's what I always stress. It's not about labeling or pigeonholing anybody, because your preferences can change as you grow as an individual, as you change jobs, companies. I used to have a very red profile when I worked in one of my previous roles in energy. And that's because that environment was very, I would say, it was male dominated hugely. But it was a very fast paced, very focused environment. I was around a lot of very driven, very assertive people, and I raised myself to that, to really complement it and to work at the same rate. But then when I changed and went to work, for example, Lucozade, that was a very startup environment, and therefore my yellow, which is my other preference, went really dialed up, because I could actually embrace more of my extroverted creative nature in that space more than I could in energy. Now, I mean, when I was in hospitality, it was just yellow most of the time, but that was because it was a very I was constantly in a people environment. So they do change.
And again, you've identified something I can relate to, which is seeing personality traits in other people, and adapting and modifying slightly to sort of.
Yes, absolutely.
I always remember, when we did this thing as a leadership team, my boss at the time, he was very high red, which is entrepreneurial, fast paced, fast thinking, all those kind of traits. I was very much, in that sort of green camp, and I know the colors are different and everything else, but more empathy, more wanting to just chat things through. So of course I would go around to his office on a Monday morning, and he would want facts, figures, numbers, the headlines, not in a sort of overly chatty mood. I would rock up and I would be saying, hey, how was your weekend? And 20 minutes of chit chat. Whereas he just wanted to know, how do we do at the weekend? How are we performing? Why is this happening? What's this? What's that? And it was funny, because after the training, we all kind of learned a little bit more about each other. And for a period of time afterwards, you could tell he was a little uncomfortable with getting into the chit chat stuff, but he kind of felt like he had to a bit.
Yes, yeah.
Kind of meet sort of meet me in the middle. But so it did teach me that, and I do recognize when I'm talking to somebody that is in that sort of trait of entrepreneurial, fast paced, fast thinker, when your time is up. And I know when to sort of say my goodbyes and
Yeah.
let them off the hook. You can almost feel their pain sometimes.
Yeah. And you know what? That's okay. I think that was one of the lessons I learned that has stuck with me the most, that actually it's not wrong or right, the approach. Actually, we're all different and that's okay. And my approach to things is good and so is theirs. It's just about how we work better together to complement each other's strengths and not dismiss each other in that process, or inadvertently make each other very uncomfortable. And I think that's what I really learned, that I'm fine as I am, and so are other people, because I equally can get frustrated with others who I find very challenging because of their preference. But actually now I don't have that experience anymore, because I appreciate, respect them for that, and see that actually it can be a benefit to me, for example, to slow down, because I can be a bit, I've already decided what I'm doing, and I'm doing it, and I'm not waiting, and that's not always great. It's nice to have a bit of a.
But thinking about our Happy Tradie, and he's going along, growing his business, everything's kind of going quite nicely. And all of a sudden, you hit a bump in the road. You've got problems with your staff, team around you. What would you say, in your experience, things that you've identified that they may need help with their leadership skills? Are there particular things that happen, or things that you've seen in your experience that would lead you to think, hey, I think this person needs some help here? Because it's not always easy. You sort of you back yourself into a corner, you put your head in the sand, you don't always think you need help, but actually getting help is probably the most important thing, and the best thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you run your own business, it's a really, really lonely place. I mean, me and my husband ran our pub together. At least we had each other, but I still found that incredibly lonely at times, because you are the top of the tree. You are the one solely responsible and accountable at all times for customer experience, for the quality of the product that's being delivered, their safety when they're in your property, for example, because it was a pub and a hotel. And everyone's looking to you all the time. So your team are, your customers are, your suppliers are. It can be a very intense, pressured environment. And I think what I've learned, even as I've evolved out of that environment in terms of the industry, because we sold our business and gone into my own business of coaching, is just because I am the only one in my business doesn't mean that I am the only one in a business, if that makes sense. Actually taking time out for myself, both to build up my network and associate myself with others who are working for themselves, as well as take time out for me to have some fun and rest, I think are the two most crucial things, because they've enabled me to recognize that actually I'm not alone at all. I'm alone in here. And I think that's, and I'm pointing to my head for anyone listening. I'm alone in my head. And actually, the more I can help myself to get out of that space and interact and connect with others, actually, the better I am, the better I feel. And that's really helped me to definitely get perspective, definitely enable me to get a bit of fun and humor when I've needed it at times. And it's also enabled me to really learn and learn quicker, because I've sought help from those who are more experienced than me in running a business. It's been hugely helpful, hugely helpful. So I think that's what I would offer is get out of your head and go and interact and surround yourself with people who you can learn from and who can give you a bit of fun, whether that be friends, family, or others. Ideally, a bit of both, for whatever the particular reason is.
Yeah. And so following on from that, then, aside from sort of family and friends, where can, our kind of reluctant leader, Happy Tradie, where can they go to find out more, to get more resources, to get more help, to learn a little bit themselves? Of course, they can come and speak to yourself,
Yeah.
like yourself. But beyond that, where would you advise they go and sort of learn a little bit more about leadership? And
I think, from the perspective of accessing resources, I think there is so much in your local area if you go find it. I think that's something that I was not aware of because I hadn't bothered to go look. And I think when I started looking, I realized how much was actually on my doorstep. So, I think identify your local business networking group, shop around 100%. I shopped around for my business network group for 2 years.
yeah,
Maybe not as long as that. You don't need to go as long as that, but I had to find the right fit for me with the right group of people, and that's so important. So I think go have a look around, go on LinkedIn, go on Google, just see what's happening around your postcode
yeah,
from a local business network perspective. I think you can learn actually a lot about leadership in those groups. You'll learn the good, the bad, and the ugly, but all of it will be helpful.
yeah,
I think in terms of wider than that, I think, from the perspective of this format, podcasting, there's some brilliant leadership podcasts out there. Even some of the highest profile podcasts like Diary of a CEO, like the High Performance Podcast, they all teach you things through the people they have conversations with. Same with, there's some great podcasts like The Squiggly Career. That's a great one for, I think, businesses of all sizes, because it's teaching really great skills all around that notion of how your career path can go in all sorts of directions and are not just one straight line.
yeah.
So yeah, I think that's what I would offer. I mean, if
I
you start looking, you'll find it.
Yeah, I certainly found surrounding yourself, and it's a well-trodden phrase, but I think it's so important, with the right tribe.
Yes.
You're the sum of the people you spend the most time with.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And if you feel like you're not getting what you need, keep looking.
yeah,
It does exist, and you can change your tribe. You don't have to stick with the same one. You can pick them. I spoke about this yesterday, actually.
yeah, exactly. Well, we're part of the same tribe,
We
aren't
are part of the same tribe. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
which is one of the reasons why we're talking today. So, just before we wrap up, thank you so much for joining me on the Happy Tradie podcast. It's been brilliant to sort of learn a lot more about leadership and the importance of leadership, where to get help, how to get help. And you sharing some of your expertise and knowledge has been invaluable. So thank you for that. But before we let you go and before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you two questions.
Yeah.
So the first one is, what is your definition of happiness? I know you like travel. You've just recently back from South Africa, I think.
Yeah.
I don't want to lead you down any paths, but what's your definition of happiness? And do you have any advice, just straight business advice to help, tradespeople get on the road to happiness? Because it's kind of like, it's not even sometimes a destination, it's a pathway, isn't it? So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
So I would say my definition of happiness is contentment.
yeah,
I think I find that, I'm at my happiest when I'm the most contented with what's going on for me, whether that be in relationships, friendships, family, where I'm at. I think dissatisfaction breeds a lot of negativity, frustration, unhappiness. And I do think, my experience of mental health, it's interesting that you touched upon that as one of the topics for this series in the podcast, is actually a constant feeling of dissatisfaction and never being content, whether that's in your own skin or outside. So contentment for me is the definition of happiness. And in terms of advice, I think in the subject of owning your own business, I think especially a business that's growing and where you're bringing people into it, I think it's recognizing that no one is going to love or think your business is as important as you do.
yeah,
And it's being accepting of that. But if you want to bring people into your business to support you, it's really understanding how can I engage them in what we're doing and enable them to feel a part of it, so they start sharing essentially that feeling of greatness about the business, and they themselves start to feel as though it's important and they care about it. And that requires you to trust them, bring them into the conversation and what's going on as much as possible, which I really would encourage anyone to do who's in a fast growing business. And I think it's also to tap into what do they think is important, so that actually you're acknowledging it may not be the same thing as you, and that's all right, as long as they're delivering on their expectations, in terms of what you want for them to deliver for your business. But actually, is there a way you can complement and equally enable them to do more of what they feel is important, and that they enjoy, and that really taps into their passions and motivations, because that's what will get you the balance and the commitment and also the better performance.
I love that. I love that. I think it's important to have those values set at the core of the business, so that the people that you hire, people that you invite to work with you, are kind of on the same sort of mission, the same same values. And in fact, values is a future episode that we're going to dive into, because I think that's so important.
Oh God, yeah, it's like my favorite topic. I look forward to listening to that one.
Lisa, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and good luck in the future. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I've loved it. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for having me.